Hello, survivors and dwellers, and to those of you returning to my little corner of the wasteland, welcome back. I am the wasteland historian. Join me as I journey through ruins to uncover the buried stories of the wastes. And some stories aren't buried at all. They're standing, lit, and still very much intact. New Vegas didn't survive the end of the world by accident. It survived because one man prepared for it while everyone else argued about whether or not it was coming. Long before the bombs fell, Robert Edwin House was already watching the world collapse. Not from a battlefield or a government office, but from boardrooms, data models, and automated systems designed to replace human error. While the nation struggled with riots, food shortages, and fear, House reached a very different conclusion than everyone else around him. The problem wasn't war. It wasn't ideology, it was unpredictability. And if unpredictability was the enemy, then people were part of the problem. In tonight's broadcast, we're not starting with a man in a chamber, sealed inside a penthouse. We're starting with the decisions that put him there. Because Robert House didn't lose his humanity overnight. He set it aside deliberately, one rational choice at a time. So put on your checkered blazer, grab your lucky dice, and step onto the strip with me. Beneath the neon lights of New Vegas isn't luck, it's design. And tonight, we're tracing that design back to the man who built it. This is the life and mind of Robert House.
Vault-Tec have prepared these
Robert House didn't grow up learning cooperation or trust. He learned that power changes hands suddenly, and when it does, sentiment means nothing. He believed the future could be designed in his favor, but only if human cost was treated as an acceptable variable. These beliefs didn't develop after the Great War. They shaped him long before the first bomb fell. Orphaned before the age of 3, House was left in the care of his half-brother Anthony. Anthony had little interest in sharing the House legacy. He decided to seize control of the family fortune and business before Robert ever came of age. Robert was not merely excluded from the family or fortune, he was completely erased. His legitimacy questioned, his inheritance denied, and his presence removed entirely. With Robert removed, Anthony assumed full control of the family's largest enterprise, H&H Tools. From this, House learned his next formative lesson. Systems protect the powerful, not the deserving. When old world psychologists studied individuals who shaped the world around them, they didn't begin with the final act. They began with the pattern. And House's life follows a pattern so consistent it almost looks inevitable in hindsight. Robert House does not descend into chaos, he ascends toward absolute order, and demands the world twist itself to match. His life isn't a sequence of transformations, it's a single logic applied at an increasing scale. Every action reinforces a belief, removes a restraint, and shifts the cost elsewhere. Each decision intensifies on its own, but together they shape both House and the world around him at the same time. Rather than relying on family, House turned inward. His response to the betrayal was not rebellion or rage, but mastery. He completed high school early, likely a result of his extraordinary intelligence, and was accepted into the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, later known as the Commonwealth Institute of Technology. He accelerated his education, gravitating towards disciplines that rewarded precision and punished error. like mathematics, computation, and engineering. Graduating at just 22 years old, House founded Robco Industries in 2042. Drawing on his early exposure to industry and innovation, he transformed Robco into the most valuable and profitable pre-war technology company in the world in less than 5 years. House claimed that by 2050 he was worth $30 billion, an insane amount for someone only 30 years old. This started a trend for House that accelerated the more wealth and power he attained. The more money he acquired, the more insulated he became from people and society, and the easier it was for the cost to disappear from the equation entirely. By then, Robert House had already internalized a belief that would define his future. Progress cannot be trusted to people. It must be created and controlled. He started his journey in the industry building power before he made the shift to expansion and hostile takeovers. House wouldn't just stick to one section of the industry either. He was driven, ambitious, and learned that once you understand the mechanism, you can dominate it. He would expand his reach into different sectors like home appliances with the Mr. Handy, personal computers like the Terminal and Pip-Boy, operating systems, and defense contracts with the military. Speaking of military contracts, in a rare moment of transactional cooperation, House even co-developed the Stealth Boy and worked on the Liberty Prime project with General Atomics, orchestrated by the US military. House didn't cooperate out of shared vision, but treated collaboration as a tool to push himself further. Using the lessons he'd learned so far, he started to acquire companies like Abraxadine Chemical, a company that produced detergent and other household cleaners, after his small empire took off. But House would end up expanding and absorbing at the expense of other smaller or less predominant businesses, or removing competitors altogether, which eventually included his half-brother Anthony's company, H&H Tools, that was taken out of Robert's reach after their parents died. House used his connections, wealth, and power to attempt a corporate takeover, slowly buying up the market share of the company. Employees from H&H Tools even stated in terminal entries that Robco was offering better deals to their clients than they were. One of H&H's employees even tried to look into Robco's SEC filings to learn about the company's information and financial results. But due to House's insulation from the company, no one could actually find out who ran Robco. Another brilliant move from House, distancing himself from his company, reaping all the benefits, and avoiding all consequences. Robert House believed H&H Tools was his, and he used every instrument available to take it back. The lesson Anthony taught him as a child came into play, and sentiment played no part. H&H wasn't claimed through justice or reconciliation, but through pressure. Starving the company quietly, legally, and completely. What mattered to House wasn't that Anthony took the company. It was how easily the system allowed it to happen. No violence, no confrontation, just paperwork, signatures, and silence. That was the revelation. Outcomes weren't decided by morality or merit, but by who understood existing structures well enough to bend them. Anthony hadn't taught House cruelty. He taught him how power actually worked. It didn't announce itself or argue its case. It moved silently through institutions already in place. From that moment on, House stopped asking whether something was fair. He only asked whether it could be manipulated. House finally understands that he can leverage processes to reward him control. The question was no longer whether he could rule markets, but whether the future itself could be shaped the same way. He shifts his mindset from business dominance to infrastructure dominance, because rockets don't negotiate with targets, and progress cannot be recovered once lost. House sets his sights on another acquisition, Repcon Aerospace. Repcon had fended off offers from multiple corporate giants, including Poseidon Energy, prior to Robco and House locking in on them. President Leonard Steeple and Chief Financial Officer Julia Masters managed to stand their ground and block them, saying the company wouldn't be going anywhere near defense contracts. After a while, a second offer for Repcon was made, but this time by Robco. Due to Steeple's love for his company and his admirable integrity, he again refused to sell out to Robco when the offer was made. But that sort of sentimentality wasn't going to stop House and his goals. Steeple's general manager, Pierce, realized the potential of the sale and warned him of the possibility of a hostile takeover if he didn't take it. Unbeknownst to Steeple, House slowly bought up Repcon stock from 2075 to 2076, and after a year he owned the majority. The takeover was almost complete. As House quietly accumulated stock, Repcon leadership began to fracture as competing interests quietly took hold. Julia Masters worked with Pierce to push the deal through from the shadows. A failed board vote to sell the company triggered internal chaos, and alliances shifted quickly. Masters, along with Robco-aligned board members, turned against President Steeple, voting to force him out. Repcon didn't fall to an external attack. It collapsed from the inside.
The company really took off when Robco purchased Repcon in late 2076 to develop unmanned rockets to explore the solar system, to assist with some of Robco's military projects, as well as developing unmanned space exploration. The relationship between Robco and Repcon is mutually beneficial, and we hope that both companies bolster each other well into the next century.
House didn't need a friendly merger or public approval, only timing, leverage, and a company primed to fail. Once board control tipped in his favor, Repcon was absorbed into Robco. Not through persuasion or deals, but through institutional pressure applied at exactly the right moment. The purchase didn't just give House another asset. It showed him more proof that he could use money, insider influence, and board politics to get what he wanted. More importantly, it taught House that resistance didn't need to be confronted. It could be rendered irrelevant by reshaping it from the inside out. By the time Robert House turned his attention to government, he had already learned something most people rarely ever do. Authority didn't come from titles or laws. It came from control. To House, the government wasn't an enemy to be challenged or a partner to be trusted. It wasn't a stabilizing force. It was a bottleneck. Slow, reactive, and built around compromise in a world accelerating towards collapse. Red tape, committees, regulations, and negotiations weren't inconveniences, they were liabilities. Institutions designed to move carefully were ill-suited for a moment that demanded speed, decisiveness, and certainty. Government required consensus before action. Failure wasn't an accident, it was inevitable. Once House set his sights on a goal, he refused to slow down to bring those without instincts with him. He moved with a singular focus, turning himself into an immovable force while the world around him hesitated. As shortages worsened and unrest spread, his patience diminished even further. In his mind, every delay wasn't caution. It was time wasted, lives lost, and futures forfeited. If the government couldn't keep up, it wasn't something to reform, it was something to be bypassed completely. Years later, when you speak to him directly, House doesn't hide his disdain for bureaucracy or soften his previous views. He still sees the US government as short-sighted and incapable, and openly refers to himself as an autocrat. It isn't an insult, but an apt description. In other words, one power to rule them all.
I prefer the term autocrat. I would rule as a chief executive. I would not answer to a board of directors or any other entity. Nothing to impede progress. If you want to see the fate of democracies, look out the windows.
A chief executive with no board of directors or any other entity to answer to. Nothing to impede progress. Another example of this anti-bureaucratic sentiment is shown when speaking to him about the NCR, or the New California Republic.
To your untrained eyes, it may look as though mankind is making a comeback. In the NCR, you have something that resembles a nation-state. They're regurgitations of the past.
House seems to think that the NCR is actually more dangerous than Caesar's Legion in terms of insidious intent. In his mind, the NCR wasn't proof that democracy survived the Great War. It was proof that bureaucracy did. Different flags, same delays, same faith in process over delivery. On the other hand, House recognized something else in the NCR that would matter later. Strip away the uniforms, regulations, and authority, and they're still just people. People who wanted rest, distraction, escape.
Why would I want to go to war against the NCR? They're my best customers.
Predictable impulses that could be anticipated, measured, and indulged. Even the most disciplined institutions were ultimately weak from human need, and human needs were predictable. House had his hand in nearly every sector, including city infrastructure. In one of his earliest large-scale experiments, Robco helped design a city where all important roles, minus the mayor, were taken by carefully programmed Robco and General Atomics robots. In Watoga, everyday commerce still involved humans. Shops were staffed, streets were walked. But the system that enforced law, maintained order, and governed the city no longer answered to human judgment. Police, civil services, municipal authority, and even assistant teaching positions were handed to machines. Even the assistant to the mayor was an AI program. Maya was created at the Robco Research Center to help the mayor with their daily tasks. On paper, the city would be efficient, clean, and basically perfect. But progress had already crossed the line. Authority had been removed from human hands. This wasn't seen as a problem, but it should have been recognized as a warning. Watoga showed what progress looked like once humans were no longer required. Not just in factories or warehouses, but in systems that decided outcomes. For the first time, people could see where efficiency and progress would lead, and that it wouldn't ask for their permission. Watoga was contained. Robco wasn't. The same logic that automated police and civil authority there was already spreading outward into logistics, manufacturing, farming, and infrastructure across the country. The city wasn't the future, it was proof of concept. As automation accelerated, fear followed. Jobs vanished faster than alternatives could replace them. Shortly before the Great War in late 2077, large-scale labor uprisings were spreading like wildfire across the country. Corporations and the government pushed automated systems and robotics to replace human labor. This disrupted industrial production and accelerated a collapse of public trust in both corporate power and government leadership. Driven by widespread fear of job loss, economic instability, and declining wages, citizens responded with vandalism and acts of violence. The core of the unrest was in Appalachia, where local workers, miners, and families, including organized unions, rose up against corporate agents and policies that threatened to displace them. Robco Industries was one of several megacorporations whose automation technologies reshaped the labor market, supplying and streamlining many of the robots that put workers out of jobs. In a pre-war record, you can see a group of protesters outside City Hall in LA displaying their rage by taking turns using a baseball bat to destroy a Mr. Handy unit on the front steps. Other protesters surrounded them, yelling and waving picket signs with the words "On Strike, Unions Against Robco," "Robot equals Scab," and "People, not profits." For House, this wasn't chaos. It was confirmation. Events across the country were proving him right. Everything wasn't falling apart, it was falling into place. When protests reached a breaking point in Appalachia, Hornwright Industrial deployed fleets of strikebreaker units, robots customized and supported through Robco contracts to suppress the riots and forcibly remove strikers. These robots used lethal force to contain and eliminate worker resistance, marking one of the bloodiest turning points in the automation riots. Against this backdrop, House's commitment to technological progress and his refusal to slow down for public sentiment began to define the rest of his life. Survivors and dwellers, thank you so much for joining me inside Robert House's mind. This was only the first part of his story. In the next broadcast, we'll watch those beliefs leave theory behind and take shape in a world he tries to control. We'll see what House does with the lessons he's learned and how he'll put them into action. Until next time, I am the Wasteland Historian, and this archive remains open.
Vault Tech have prepared these